things in the world are not going exactly well right now, with PC prices also becoming more and more expensive as time goes on. Demand for computers is still high though, and due to that, the latest DDR3 platform, LJ1150, suddenly saw a resurgence, as Core i7s from this generation are still capable processors, while DDR3 RAM prices have stayed inside reasonable margin. Many tech YouTubers have already covered the high-end segment on this platform in 2026, but I decided to push things even further by building a complete $200 gaming build using LJ1150, which can still run most popular games which are out there today. First things first, logic board. I have chosen the simple H81GB board, as it was the cheapest offering I could find which had 4 RAM slots. This logic board is very simple, but crucially, it is acceptable to use with the processor of my choice, Xeon E3-1230V3, which is literally a server version of Core i7-4770, meaning that except for the absence of the integrated GPU, it is literally the same thing. I went for it as I found it in a cheap bundle with RAM included, but you can easily buy this processor from AliExpress for around $15 shipped, which in some places in the world is a lot cheaper than buying an actual i7. Unlike on later platforms, you do not need to do anything with the logic board or the BIOS if you want to use a Xeon processor. You can literally just put this processor in the socket and it will work straight away on most boards. RAM, the main culprit in today's builds. I wanted to put 32GB of RAM into this computer as cheaply as I could. And so I ended up going with this Clis3 kit, which is supposed to run at 1866 MHz. Graphics card. I went with a GTX 980, as this card offers the same raw performance as the GTX 1060 on the same drivers, but for a cheaper price. Yes, it only has 4GB of VRAM, which is a limitation in modern AAA titles. But in every game which will run well on this card, lack of VRAM is not going to be a big limitation. While most demanding titles from the last year or two may not be playable on it, everything else that you can throw at it will in fact run. Theoretically, processor inside our build can handle a better GPU, the one which will allow you to play every game out there, and I will explore this later in the video, as what a $50 step up in price can offer you on this platform. But for now, we will stick with the 980. Basically, any other GPU from this price range will do a similar job performance-wise. This could be an RX 570, 580 or GTX 1060 or any other similar card. Now, the rest of this build is very simple. An old 500 watt power supply is used, with a basic solid-state drive, and a new, simple, minimalistic FSP computer case. Also, I used a basic Intel stock cooler for the CPU. It tends to be enough in this case. With that, our total for this build ends up being about $200. Arguably, I think that a modern gaming computer should run Windows 11, this build included. It cannot officially run it, as the processor inside is too old, but we can easily bypass this in the setup by adding 2 register keys, and voila, we are up and running with the latest release of Windows 11. Now, when a new feature update will release, you cannot directly update to it, but you can download Windows 11 ISO, open it in Rufus, connect a USB drive, and create a patched installer. When it will be ready, you can simply run it, choose the option to keep your files and apps, and as such, new feature update will be installed. General usability is still impressively strong on this system. It runs all of the basics very well, like browsing the web, watching videos, editing documents, etc. More demanding things, like photo editing, can slow it down, but it is still perfectly usable, while 4K video editing in DaVinci Resolve is doable, but certainly much slower compared to a modern computer, and you can forget even about a laggy playback when many effects are applied. One notable thing though, SSD speeds. We have to keep in mind that no matter how usable 4th generation Intel processors are to this day, the platform itself is from 2013, meaning that only some high-end boards offered M2 SSD support. But this is not the case for 95% of 1150 boards. This system, as a whole, still feels snappy, but in many instances, speed is bottlenecked because we must use SATA storage, which is limited to 600 MB per second. Whenever you want to move large files, or you install games, or, well, you want to edit some videos, or Windows decides to install some updates, you will often see 100% disk usage, which might translate into a sluggish experience for the time something uses the drive. In Cyberpunk, on medium settings, with crowd density set to low and FSR enabled in auto mode, this computer has gotten anywhere from about 45 to 50 frames per second, though frame dips did happen when you were in the center of the city, or you were in other intensive areas, or just causing chaos in the city. Forza Horizon 4 on ultra settings has gotten about 70 to 80 frames per second. Sometimes the frame rate could dip to about 60, and sometimes it would rise to about 100, but generally it ran like this, totally playable without any problems. Forza Horizon 5 on high settings has managed to get about 70 to 80 frames per second. During different weather, frame rate would also vary. Sometimes you could see about 60 FPS, sometimes you could see about 80, and also sometimes, especially when you're getting close to the festival, noticeable freezes can happen. Otherwise, the game ran very well and looked fantastic, though as you could see, CPU utilization was especially high sometimes. PUBG. On the lowest settings, with 60 FPS cap enabled both inside the game and in Riva Tuner, you would get 60 FPS. Yet, the thing is, although this frame rate is generally stable when nothing happens, whenever an enemy appears or you're in a very hot spot, you'll often see both frame drops and freezes, especially when you're starting to shoot at people. This is very pronounced in TDM, where lots of things happen on a very small place, as the frame rate tanks down. The footage which I showed right now was made when the RAM was in single channel, so it does worsen things a lot. But you can see the point. Even with dual channel RAM, frame drops may be similar to the ones shown here when you play TDM. In classic mode, things are a tiny bit better. And this is actually one of the first games which, as we can see, really push our CPU to its limits. Stalker 2. On the lowest settings, with FSR set to performance, during the first couple of minutes of gameplay, when some of the textures did not yet load in, would get about 25 frames per second, but even at this point it was not really playable, and when all of the textures load in, well, you can expect about 15 to 20, depending where you're located on the map. Not playable, unfortunately, but considering that this GPU is almost 12 years old, I'll give it a pass. For $200, we have built a PC which is able to do 90% of the things computers, which are at least 2 times as expensive, can do. It plays most games which are out there, and it does so well in older, less demanding titles, all while still being suitable to be a solid all-rounder system for other things. You will not get super high frame rates in modern games, and you do often have to sacrifice the settings, nor most likely you'll be able to do advanced 3D modeling or edit a whole movie using this system, but most of the things we do on computers tend to fit within this margin either way, and for $200, this system can offer us a lot. Now, I do wonder though, if stepping up to $250 and getting a way better GPU can radically improve this computer. I have chosen RX 5600 XT for this test, which offers about 150% of the performance the GTX 980 has, along with 6GB of VRAM and a way more modern architecture. Now, with the 5600 XT, on high settings, with crowd density set to low, this computer has managed to get about 55 frames per second, which already looks a lot better than it did before. Graphics already look noticeably better, and the frame rate overall is higher, but we still see the same drop whenever we're in populated areas, and by that I mean our FPS can drop to about 35 to 40 frames per second. Basically nothing changed in Forza Horizon 4. On the same Ultra preset, we are getting about 90 to 100 FPS. Game runs well, but once again, it already did so on the GTX 980. Forza Horizon 5, on Ultra settings, has managed to get about 80 to 90 FPS. Essentially the same FPS we have gotten on the GTX 980, but now it was done on Ultra settings. The game looked even better than before and still ran great. PUBG has literally not changed at all, because even previously we were already CPU bound, and so we still see the same picture. On the lowest settings, with an external and internal FPS cap, we see unstable 60 frames per second, with freezes when many people are around you. Now Stalker 2 actually saw a huge increase. On the lowest settings, with frame generation turned on, we would see anywhere from about 60 to 80 FPS. And although input speed was not exactly great, the game was still generally playable. Yes, we were mostly CPU bound, but even then the GPU was actually often utilized to 100%. And when I have disabled frame generation, we would usually see about 30 to 40 FPS, which, although not fantastic, is a huge step up compared to a GTX 980, and as of right now, I can actually call this game playable. Yes, sometimes you will see freezes, yes, sometimes you will see FPS drop below 30, but if you lower your expectations, this is playable. Stepping up our budget and putting in a more powerful GPU has allowed us to play some modern titles in which we were previously GPU bound, though at the price of becoming strongly CPU bottlenecked. Previously, the GTX 980 would limit us to essentially 20 frames per second in some games, and the 5600 XT has removed this bottleneck, only to reveal that the Xeon, or an i7, can manage just about 30. Normally, you should put a graphics card like this into a system which has at least 6 relatively modern cores, but under current conditions, where 16GB of DDR4 RAM, which those platforms use, costing about the same as this whole platform, you can theoretically consider this option if you just want to play modern games, and you're fine with 30 FPS on the lowest settings, and you're also willing to troubleshoot and rebuild the whole computer while trying to upgrade the graphics card. Here's the thing. When I put the 5600 XT inside this computer, the first RAM slot stopped working. RAM was not the issue. I tried plugging in the GTX 980 back, and that did not work too. Lots of troubleshooting later, I found out that all LG 1150 and 1151 boards have one fatal issue. With time, socket solder joints weaken, meaning that the CPU loses contacts with some of the pins, which ultimately means that just about anything can randomly stop working on this system. Even worse, the only proper fix is replacing the entire socket, which is financially not viable to do on systems as old as this. One band-aid fix, which exists, is putting a piece of folded paper under the socket mount on the backside of the board, and it has proven to be effective, but this is not a proper fix, which may work for one day or may work for a couple years. You'll never know. Even if you want to replace the whole logic board, chances are a different board will either develop the same issue or will already come plagued. In conclusion, this $200 gaming PC has turned out quite well. It can do most of the things computers, which are times more expensive, are able to do. One main thing that you should keep in mind though is the age of LGA 1150. As this platform is 13 years old, it has already developed reliability issues and has some out-of-date hardware problems, like only working with SATA drives and not being able to install Windows 11 without patches. If your budget is strictly $200, then yes, building such a computer is a decent idea, But if you're able to save up at least 300, do it, as by doing so you will be able to build an aim-4 system, which will be miles ahead LGA 1150 in terms of modernity. If you want to put a good graphics card in an LGA 1150 computer, something like an RX 6600 or an RTX 2060 Super, you can do that, but expect 30 FPS in modern games. At this point, I strongly suggest going for an aim-4 system instead.